My name is Emily. After my dad died, my sister took control of my college fund. By the time tuition was due, the account was empty, and everyone said it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. If someone in your family ever handled your money, tell me what happened in the comments. The morning shift had settled into its usual rhythm. Cups stacked, espresso hissed. The screen on my phone lit up between orders, the subject line sharp enough to cut through the noise. Fall enrollment confirmation. The email sat open while I wiped the counter, the tuition deadline highlighted in yellow. 72 hours. It felt generous until it didn't. A buzz followed, shorter this time. My bank app opened to a polite notification. Balance below required amount. Under it, a suggestion in smaller font. Contact account manager. The college fund had always been boringly stable. Seeing it dip felt like watching a chair slide backward when someone stands up too fast. Between drink tickets, I stepped into the narrow space behind the counter and called Rachel. The line rang long enough for a customer to clear their throat. When she answered, her voice sounded busy. "I'm handling paperwork," she said. "Do you have a time frame?" I asked. "Give it a minute, it's moving." She hung up before I could ask which minute she meant. The bell over the door chimed. Rachel walked in wearing sunglasses she didn't own last month. She ordered an iced latte, tapped a new card against the reader, and glanced at her phone. "Payment cleared," she said into it, nodding as if someone could see her. The terminal beeped. Transaction approved. On my screen, the tuition portal refreshed on its own. Pending shifted to overdue without ceremony. No warning sound, just a color change. Rachel leaned on the counter. "It's in process," she said. "I need a date." She smiled, small and quick. "You always rush." The manager slid a schedule across the bar. "Can you switch your Friday?" she asked. Admissions called about a paperwork issue. Rachel's phone buzzed again. She turned away, then paused. "This month's been heavy," she said. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. The sunglasses went back on. Another order popped up. The POS chimed approval after approval, cheerful as ever. My bank app stayed stubbornly quiet, except for the balance line blinking once before settling lower. I stepped aside and opened the enrollment email again. The deadline counted down in hours now, not days. 72 had become 68, while milk steamed and cups changed hands. Rachel paid, took her drink, and touched my arm like punctuation. "Don't stress," she said. "Just tell me when," I replied. "Soon." She left. The door chimed again. A student laughed outside. Inside, the terminal flashed green. During a lull, I asked for a minute and dialed the bank from behind the shelves. The hold music started, thin and patient. On my phone, a red banner slid down the screen. Enrollment at risk. The music looped. I watched the progress wheel spin, thumb hovering, waiting for someone to pick up while the timer kept moving. The calls started before my shift ended. Admissions, then the registrar, then a number labeled unknown that left a voicemail about documentation. My manager pulled me aside and slid a printed schedule across the counter. 2 of my shifts had moved, 1 disappeared. She didn't apologize. She just said, "They said it's temporary," and asked if I could stay flexible. At home that night, the phone kept lighting up on the table while dinner cooled. My aunt asked why I was pushing so hard. An uncle texted that Rachel had always handled money for the family. Another message came in with a prayer emoji and the word patience. No one asked what the bank said. Sunday dinner happened anyway. Plates clinked, someone passed bread. Rachel took the seat near the end and started talking before anyone asked. She said she'd kept the funds steady after Dad's funeral, that markets were strange, that she didn't want me worrying during finals. Her voice stayed level, mine stayed unused. Across the table, my cousin frowned. "Why don't you trust her?" My mom nodded like the question had an answer. Rachel folded her hands. "She's stressed," she said. "School does that." The conversation moved on without me. A joke landed. Someone laughed. My phone buzzed once on the table, then stopped. The family group chat went silent after I typed, "When is the transfer scheduled?" The message sat there with no replies. Work the next morning felt smaller, fewer words, fewer questions. Marcus waited at the end of the bar with his usual drip coffee. He listened while I restocked lids and told it straight, no extra details. When I finished, he said, "If it's your money, there should be a trail." And then he took his cup and went back to his seat. That sentence stayed useful. After my shift, emails went back years. Screenshots blurred when enlarged, statements downloaded as gray PDFs with dates that almost lined up. One charge caught my eye. A credit card payoff posted the same week as the funeral. The amount matched a balance Rachel once complained about. An automated message from the university arrived mid-afternoon. The subject line promised support. The body offered a payment link and a reminder about urgency. "We're here to help," it said, underlined in blue. The help cost the exact number missing from the fund. I asked the bank for clarification. The reply came back formatted and slow, pointing me to the account manager listed on file. That name was Rachel. The confirmation email included a timestamp from the afternoon she said payment had cleared. The card type matched the one I'd seen at the register. Another call came from my mom while I was counting tips. She asked me not to escalate. She said Rachel was doing her best. The word trust showed up twice. The word deadline didn't come up at all. By evening, the school sent a final notice with a countdown clock embedded at the top. Hours replaced dates. At dinner, a plan formed without me. The family would meet Saturday. Rachel would explain. Everyone agreed that waiting sounded reasonable. I set my phone face down and gathered the papers I'd printed. The stack wasn't proof yet, just noise with numbers attached. Still, it fit in my bag. The deadline email refreshed once more, and I left it open while pulling on my jacket. Outside, the air felt thinner than it should have. Messages stayed unread. No one followed up with a time. On the calendar app, the weekend filled itself with a single block labeled Family Meeting, set by someone else. I unlocked my car and started the engine. The radio came on with an ad about student loans. I turned it down, reached for the envelope in the passenger seat, and checked the numbers again, slower this time. The phone buzzed once more as I backed out. A text from Rachel read, "Saturday will clear things up." No time, no amount, just the promise. I set the phone back down and drove toward home, keeping the deadline email open on the seat. At a stoplight, another notification slid across the screen. The university thanked me for my interest and reminded me space was limited. The light turned green. The message stayed red. I pressed the gas and watched the countdown tick while the road opened ahead. By the time I parked, the meeting time had been added to the group chat without discussion. A thumbs up appeared under it. I picked up the envelope, glanced at the clock, and walked toward the door, already late for tomorrow. The bank portal finally opened access to detailed statements after 3 transfers and a password reset that expired before it loaded. The document arrived as a spreadsheet instead of a PDF, rows stretching farther than expected. Dates lined up neatly, amounts did not. Near the top sat a scanned authorization form, signed 2 days after the funeral, granting Rachel temporary management authority. The signature was mine. The wording wasn't. Scrolling revealed the pattern. Transfers left the college fund in clean increments and landed on a personal credit card account under Rachel's name. The timing repeated itself. Every withdrawal matched a retail spike. The largest payment posted the same weekend she mentioned catching up. It wasn't subtle, it was consistent. The phrase from the cafe returned without invitation. Payment cleared. The ledger clarified it. Tuition never received $1. The payment cleared her card balance instead. The math explained the calm tone she'd used, the confidence that everyone else accepted. Numbers don't argue, they just sit there. An email hit the family thread before I could forward anything. Rachel wrote that terminology caused confusion, that accounting language scared people who weren't trained. She mentioned protecting assets and said lawyers existed for situations like this. The message ended with reassurance and a smiley face that didn't belong in a financial discussion. A cousin replied with thanks. My mom asked for patience again. I asked Rachel to meet. She suggested coffee near her office. picked the time, and ordered before I arrived. The table held 2 cups and a napkin folded into a square. She talked about stress and responsibility, about stepping up when others couldn't. When the spreadsheet slid across the table, her eyes flicked down once. "It's just accounting," she said. "Then give me a date," I replied. She took a sip and checked her phone. "Minimum payment met," she said, reading the screen like it answered everything. The cafe screen behind her showed a promotional loop about rewards points. The credit card app on my phone showed the same balance drop, time-stamped an hour earlier. No tuition entry appeared anywhere. The conversation stayed short. She repeated that it would be resolved and warned against sending partial information. I asked for the money back. She asked for trust. Neither request moved. By evening, the bank account access flickered. The transaction history grayed out. A notification followed, formal and distant, explaining a temporary freeze due to an internal review. The sender line listed Rachel as the point of contact. I called customer service. The representative read from a script and suggested waiting for the account manager. That name surfaced again. The loop closed. Another message from the university arrived, reminding me that the final deadline approached. The subject line promised clarity. The body offered none. The payment link remained active, patient, unchanged. Rachel emailed the family again, this time CCing an address labeled legal. She wrote about misinterpretation and escalations, about protecting the estate. No one responded to me when I asked why my access disappeared. The credit card app refreshed on its own. The balance sat at 0. Under it, a green checkmark appeared with the words, "Minimum payment met." The timing matched the cafe visit. I reopened the authorization form. The date stared back. 2 days after the funeral. The language about temporary management sat between clauses I didn't remember reading. My signature looked familiar enough. A final alert arrived from the bank while the spreadsheet stayed open. Access restricted pending review. Contact your account manager. The notification from the university came through while the spreadsheet was still open. It didn't ask for clarification or offer another extension. It stated that my spot had been released due to non-payment and that I could reapply next cycle. The tone was professional, almost apologetic, as if this were weather. I closed the message and reopened it once, just to be sure the words didn't change. The bank followed within the hour. A longer email this time, dense with policy language. The account was officially frozen pending review. Any access requests needed to go through the authorized manager. Rachel's name appeared again, clean and centered, like a signature block. A call from my mom came in while I stood by the sink. "Rachel showed us the paperwork," she said. "What paperwork?" "The authorization. You signed it." "For temporary access," I said. "That's still access," she replied, and lowered her voice. "You don't need to turn this into something bigger." The phrase "something bigger" showed up twice that day, once from her, once from an aunt who texted to say, "Families solve things quietly." The short-term help I'd been counting on for rent disappeared from the conversation without being mentioned. It was just understood. Rachel emailed again, this time attaching a statement from someone I recognized as a friend of a friend who worked in finance. He confirmed that her management role was legitimate and that the steps taken were standard. The word standard did a lot of work in that paragraph. At the cafe, Marcus listened without interrupting while I wiped down the counter and pretended the register wasn't empty. When the details ran out, he nodded once. "She delayed," he said. "Then reframed," I replied, and locked it in with paper, he finished. He didn't offer a fix. He just said to stop reacting to emails and start thinking about who could read numbers without taking sides. Then he paid and left a tip that covered 2 coffees instead of 1. By the time I got home, the calls stacked up, missed numbers from the bank, a voicemail from an office labeled legal intake asking me to return the call, a text from Rachel asking if I'd calmed down. The authorization form sat on the table where I'd dropped it, the signature still unmistakably mine. The realization didn't arrive as a feeling. It showed up as a list. Delays until deadlines passed. Language that sounded neutral. Documents that turned temporary into permanent. Every step looked small alone. Together, they closed everything. Another email from the university arrived, thanking me for understanding and wishing me luck. The payment link was gone. Rachel called again. Her name filled the screen. I watched it ring long enough to memorize the vibration pattern, then swiped it away. The phone buzzed back almost immediately. I turned it face down and opened my laptop. Search results filled the screen with firms and acronyms. CPA offices listed services and testimonials about clarity. One site offered a free consultation. Another charged by the hour and promised precision. The cursor hovered over a booking form. The bank sent a final alert while the page loaded. Access restricted. Contact your account manager. The repetition felt intentional, like a door being checked one more time after it was already locked. A message from my mom followed, asking if I'd apologize so the weekend meeting could stay calm. The word calm sat between us like an object. I didn't respond. Rachel tried again. The call went unanswered. A voicemail appeared seconds later, upbeat and controlled. "This doesn't need to get complicated," she said. "We're family." The booking calendar refreshed. Available slots blinked in blue. I filled in my name, selected the earliest appointment, and attached the spreadsheet without adding a note. The confirmation page took a second longer than expected. Another call came in before it finished loading. Rachel again. The screen lit up, dimmed, lit up. I cleared the voicemail notification without listening. The confirmation email arrived with a timestamp and an invoice estimate. I clicked confirm and watched the button gray out. The phone buzzed once more, then stopped. The room stayed mostly empty after the enrollment notice. A mattress on the floor, a lamp borrowed from the living room, clothes folded into stacks because there wasn't a dresser yet. The schedule on my phone filled itself without asking. Double shifts on weekdays and extra weekend clothes. Nobody framed it as help. It was just availability. Workdays blurred together. Cups moved, orders printed, tips landed heavier at night. The university email thread stopped updating. Nothing left to negotiate. Rent still arrived on time. Groceries stayed basic. The silence from school wasn't dramatic. It was efficient. One night after a late shift, the authorization form came back out. The language hadn't changed since the last time it was read. Temporary management, best interest, discretion. The signature looked steady, no shaking line, no mark of hesitation. That part mattered more than I liked. Trusting Rachel had felt practical. She'd always handled the forms, the calls, the follow-ups. Signing without reading felt like cooperation. Avoiding a confrontation at the table felt like maturity. None of it looked reckless while it was happening. It only showed up later, arranged as consequences. The phone buzzed with a text from my mom asking if I'd eaten. Another followed about keeping the peace. The messages weren't cruel, they were careful. Support arrived as suggestions to wait, to soften, to let it pass. At the cafe, Marcus asked how many hours I was pulling now. The number surprised both of us. "Burnout math," he said. "Temporary," I replied. He nodded once. "Nothing temporary about frozen accounts." He didn't push. He just slid a receipt across the counter and circled a line item with his pen. Independent audit. Forensic trail. The words stayed on the paper after he left. That night, the laptop stayed open longer. Savings were counted twice. The balance didn't stretch far. Paying for an audit meant saying no to other things. It also meant not asking the family for anything again. The trade was clear enough to make. Rachel called once. The voicemail was upbeat, suggesting a reset and reminding me that stress made people irrational. The word irrational felt curated. The call went unanswered. The goal shifted without ceremony. No more explanations, no more timing arguments, no more convincing anyone who already believed a different version. Numbers didn't need agreement. Systems didn't care about tone. Search results filled the screen again. CPA offices listed specialties and disclaimers. One promised speed, another emphasized accuracy. A third mentioned litigation support in smaller font. The cursor hovered there longer. Another double shift posted itself on the schedule. Accepting it took one tap. The confirmation email landed with the subject line, "Updated availability." The irony stayed mild enough to ignore. A group chat message appeared with plans for the weekend. I left it unopened. The authorization form slid back into its envelope and went into the bag I took to work. Not as leverage, just as context. Near midnight, the booking page refreshed. Available slots thinned. The earliest appointment sat 3 days out. The price estimate displayed underneath, honest and unflinching. It equaled 2 weeks of tips. The clock on the stove clicked over to 11:58. The apartment stayed dim. No background noise except the laptop fan. A final email from the university arrived, generic and polite, asking for feedback on the admissions process. It included a survey link and a thank you for considering them. The message closed itself after being read. The booking form asked for a reason. A drop-down offered categories. I selected account discrepancy and left the comment box blank. Marcus texted once. That report needs tracing, not summaries. A thumbs up went back. The cursor hovered over the confirm button. The amount recalculated once more. The savings total dropped in my head before it dropped on paper. Rent would still clear. Groceries would too. Everything else could wait. At 11:59, the button changed color when the cursor passed over it. The wording stayed simple. Confirm appointment. The phone buzzed again. Rachel's name lit the screen and faded. The call went unanswered. Confirm. The page loaded. A confirmation number appeared. The invoice followed, itemized and unapologetic. The timestamp read 12 a.m. CPA meetings started on time and stayed clinical. A screen shared numbers, arrows, and dates without commentary. The report traced transfers month by month, showing the fund bleeding long before tuition ever came due. Payments crossed accounts, paused, then reappeared as personal debt reductions. One column flagged activity predating the funeral. Another showed balances replenished just enough to avoid alerts. Nothing about this looked accidental. The language avoided blame and avoided emotion. It described commingling, repayment assumptions, and intent inferred from patterns. The conclusion arrived quietly, printed in plain font at the bottom of the page for later reference. Rachel responded within a day, before the draft finished circulating. Her email framed the findings as interpretation, not fact, and questioned the auditor's scope. She attached a letter arguing the original intent of the fund allowed flexibility, citing conversations no one could verify. The phrase family understanding appeared twice. She CC'd an address labeled counsel and warned against premature conclusions. The timing was precise. Family replies followed quickly, asking whether the report changed anything legally. Doubt crept back in without saying its name. The spreadsheet still showed the same trail, unchanged by opinion, and remained mathematically consistent throughout the review. The auditor walked through the reframe without drama. The authorization signed after the funeral wasn't the start, it was cover. Control existed earlier through access, habits, and defaults set over years. Bills routed to one inbox, calls returned by one voice, emergencies handled by one person. The report labeled it normalization of control. Another section explained motive without excusing it. Borrowing to preserve an image, assuming reimbursement would follow, counting on silence. The document never said theft, it said misuse and reliance on trust. Seeing it written that way made the scope impossible to shrink again for anyone reading carefully. Rachel countered formally the next morning. The objection cited intent, family practice, and emotional context. It argued the audit ignored why decisions were made and focused narrowly on outcomes. The bank acknowledged receipt and paused action pending review. That pause mattered. Messages from relatives asked whether this meant the report was wrong. Someone suggested mediation. Someone else suggested letting it go. The leverage thinned without disappearing. Nothing had been reversed, but nothing moved forward either. The CPA cautioned patience and documented everything. The calendar showed 48 hours until the report finalized with legal effect once filed by the firm. Work continued as if nothing changed. Shifts stacked. Tips filled envelopes. Rachel sent one more message asking for time and unity. The word unity sat beside an attachment titled Statement of Position. Family reactions wavered again, cautious and conflicted. No one asked about the pre-funeral debt. No one mentioned the credit card. The silence worked both ways. The evidence existed, but belief shifted minute to minute. The CPA emailed an update confirming methodology and independence. Reading it felt like standing on a narrow ledge. Falling hadn't happened yet. Neither had solid ground formed beneath my feet during the wait. The report's appendices ran long and exact. Transaction IDs, timestamps, routing numbers. Each page reduced the argument to sequence. Rachel's version required forgetting dates and trusting tone. The numbers required neither. Still, the risk stayed real. An objection could stall outcomes. Access could remain frozen. Family pressure could turn louder. The CPA advised preparing for both acceptance and resistance. No celebration followed the draft, just preparation. Files were backed up twice, copies labeled, emails saved. The process favored patience over speed. The finish line existed, but the space between felt exposed until the final clock ran out for everyone involved. Rachel tried calling that evening. The voicemail stayed measured, referencing misunderstandings and shared history. It asked for restraint and reminded me that reports didn't capture heart. The call wasn't returned. Another email arrived from the bank acknowledging the objection and outlining next steps. The timeline extended, the freeze remained. Nothing improved, but nothing collapsed. That balance felt temporary and fragile. The CPA sent a brief note asking me to review the final draft for factual accuracy only. No arguments, no edits, just confirmation. The attachment loaded slowly. Each page looked heavier than the last as the weight tightened again overnight. The meeting took place at my aunt's dining table, the one that always stayed covered with a tablecloth, even when no one ate. Rachel arrived early and arranged her papers into a neat stack. Everyone else filtered in with coffee cups and cautious greetings. No one asked why I brought a laptop. When it was my turn to speak, the chair scraped once against the floor and stopped. The screen opened to the report. No preface followed. Dates came first. Amounts followed. Each line read the same way the auditor had written it, without emphasis. This transfer happened on March 14th, I said, and this one on April 2nd, and this one on May 9th. Rachel leaned back, arms crossed. "You're misunderstanding how accounting works," she said. "These are internal movements. Families don't run like corporations." The report moved on. A column highlighted payments that never touched tuition. Another marked repayments to a personal credit card. The room stayed attentive in a way that didn't feel supportive or hostile. It felt procedural. "That's not what that means," Rachel said. "You're taking it out of context." "You always do that with numbers." A cousin asked what the context was. Rachel answered by talking about responsibility and pressure. Someone nodded. Someone else checked their phone. The cursor moved down one page. "This line item," I said, reading the label aloud, "is a personal credit card payoff." The amount followed. "The date is April 18th. Rachel shook her head. "That's normal," she said. "It balances out." It was temporary. The next tab opened. A bank statement appeared beside the report. Routing numbers matched. Timestamps matched. The same amount appeared twice, once leaving the fund and once landing on the card. No tuition entry appeared anywhere on that date. Silence stretched. No one interrupted. "It's just a misunderstanding," Rachel said, slower now. "Dad trusted me." "You're making this sound worse than it is." The report scrolled again. Another payoff, another date, another match. Phones buzzed almost in sync. An email notification lit my screen at the corner. "We apologize for the inconvenience," the subject line read. The timing landed without comment. My aunt leaned forward. "Rachel," she said, "can you explain this one?" Rachel gathered her papers into a tighter stack. She talked about stress and timing and how things looked different under scrutiny. The explanation circled without touching the numbers. No new dates appeared. No missing funds returned. The report closed. The laptop stayed open. A decision didn't arrive as a vote. It came as a series of small statements. "We can't ignore this. We need someone else handling accounts. This isn't about intent anymore." Rachel stood up. Her chair moved back farther than necessary. "So that's it," she said. "After everything I did." No one answered. The silence wasn't dramatic. It was conclusive. My mom spoke last. "We'll change access," she said, "for now." Rachel looked at me once, as if expecting something. Nothing came. The laptop shut. The screen went dark. Someone asked about next steps. Someone else mentioned calling the bank. The conversation shifted into logistics, the way it always did when emotions failed to change outcomes. Rachel gathered her coat. "This won't end like you think," she said. "It never does." She left before anyone responded. The room exhaled without relief. Cups moved. Chairs slid back under the table. The tablecloth stayed smooth. Another email arrived while people stood up. "Account management update. We appreciate your patience." No one laughed. No one needed to. The meeting broke apart in pieces. My aunt asked if I wanted leftovers. I declined. My mom said she'd call later. She didn't say about what. Outside, the air felt normal. Cars passed. A neighbor waved. The phone buzzed again, this time with a confirmation from the bank that access changes were pending. The laptop slid back into the bag. The charger stayed behind. Walking to the car, the confirmation email opened itself. The subject line stayed neutral. The content stayed brief. Rachel's name appeared once more, listed under Previous Manager, already grayed out. The phone stayed in my hand as the door unlocked. Another message arrived, asking for documentation to finalize the change. The reply field opened. I started typing, attaching the report again, numbers already aligned, while the screen waited for the next step to finish locking in. The change didn't arrive all at once. It came as small adjustments that no one announced. Rachel stopped answering questions about bills. Someone else started the spreadsheet. A different name appeared on account emails. At family gatherings, conversation shifted when she entered the room. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. The trust didn't disappear. It narrowed. A few relatives stopped calling me entirely. Others checked in with careful phrasing, as if tone might trigger another audit. No one asked Rachel to explain things anymore. No one defended her either. The silence around her felt different than before. It didn't protect. It watched. There wasn't a speech or apology. There wasn't a reconciliation scene. Rachel sent one text asking if I wanted to talk. I replied with a neutral answer and didn't suggest a time. The distance stayed intact without effort. The bank fixed things in installments. A partial refund posted first, labeled Adjustment 1. Another followed weeks later. Each deposit arrived with an automated message thanking me for patience. The phrase repeated often enough to feel intentional. The amounts never rounded nicely. They restored balance without restoring time. A letter came next, printed and formal. It confirmed the reimbursement schedule and listed new access permissions. The opening line read, "Thank you for your patience." The paper felt heavier than it needed to be. It went into a folder with other documents that no longer required defense. Old accounts closed quietly. New passwords replaced old ones. Two-factor authentication asked for codes that only my phone received. The change took minutes and stuck. No one argued. No one asked why. Work stayed busy. The schedule thinned slightly when a new hire started. Tips evened out. Rent cleared. Groceries upgraded from basic to acceptable. One night after a late shift, an email from the university appeared without warning. It didn't mention the past term. It offered a seat for the next one and outlined steps to accept. The deadline sat comfortably far away. The acceptance letter printed cleanly. No highlights, no countdown clock. The tuition amount matched the balance I'd built myself. The payment confirmation landed minutes later. Approved. No caveats. Marcus saw the envelope on the counter the next morning. "Looks final," he said. "It is," I replied. "Good," he said, and left his coffee untouched. Family conversations found a new rhythm. Logistics replaced speculation. Rachel attended less often. When she did, she listened more than she spoke. Someone else handled payments. The arrangement held. One afternoon, the last refund posted. The amount matched the audit's final page. The bank followed with another email. "Thank you for your patience." The sentence ended with a period this time. Keys changed too. The old set went into a drawer, unused. A new apartment closer to work came with a shorter commute and a quieter lease. The move took a single afternoon. Boxes stacked neatly. The mattress stayed on the floor for a week longer than planned. Rachel didn't show up during the move. No one commented on her absence. My mom dropped off extra towels and left without staying. She hugged once and said she was proud. Nothing else followed. Classes started with orientation emails and bookstore receipts. The campus looked the same as before, just later than expected. No one there knew the cost. That part stayed private. On the first night back from an evening shift, the apartment door closed with a solid sound. The new keys rested in my palm, lighter than the old ones. Shoes came off by the door. The light switch worked on the first try. The key ring found its place on a hook by the wall. The old keys stayed in the drawer. The new ones caught once, then settled. My phone buzzed with a routine alert from the bank confirming account activity. Everything looked normal. The screen dimmed. The room held steady. The shift ended. The door locked. My hand dropped away from the keys as they stopped moving, the hook holding what it needed while the rest stayed behind.